So if you watched our last video on the Sony, sorry.
So the thing though is that while the screen is really nice, it does eat up a lot of battery. And the battery life on this camera is notoriously bad.
Yeah, it's
I would say
bad.
You get, what, 2-3 hours out of this camera?
Yeah, I think we've been out here for about 2 or 3 hours tonight, and it's just about dead.
It will turn itself off or put itself in standby mode after a certain number of minutes. That's settable.
That's a whole nother issue.
The problem with standby mode is that it takes forever to wake up from standby mode. So it turns out it's actually easier just to turn the camera off and turn it back on than it is to actually try to just jam the shutter button until it wakes back up. I'm not exactly sure why that's the case.
Yeah, it's very odd. I mean, why should it be any different coming out of standby mode than it would be turning on to
off?
off?
When you turn it on and go to shoot, it actually happens very quickly.
It's not that
so
slow.
I don't know if it's a firmware. I'm not exactly sure what the problem is, but it is a little bit strange that standby mode to shooting is so slow. The other interesting thing about the battery is that the battery can be put into the camera incorrectly, which is sort of a strange feature.
Yeah, and by that, Jay, means that not only can you mix it up left to right, but you could even put the contacts facing outward. Now, of course,
that would be really dumb.
You know, you'd be stupid to do that. The more common thing you would do is just put the contacts that actually make contact with the battery, you could put them in reversed and have no idea because the battery will latch into place just fine and the door will close just fine, so you have no indication that you put it in wrong until you try to turn it on, and then you're like, well, is this battery just dead, or did I put it in wrong?
Or you might think it's in standby mode and I just need to wait 5 or 6 minutes and it'll start up.
One thing I really found impressive about this camera, and they can do this because it has a fixed lens, they have a leaf shutter in there. And the big advantage to that, well, there's two main advantages. One is that it's really silent. And I mean, even in mechanical shutter mode, it's so silent. Other thing that it does for you, the leaf shutter, is it gives you the option for really fast, high-speed flash sync. And that's great as well. We unfortunately didn't get any external flashes to play with the camera. There is a small built-in flash, but it's pretty weak. But that is amazing that you can shoot at, say, 1/4000th of a second. Of course, that is somewhat dependent on what your aperture is set to. There are some limitations there. But you can have that super fast, high-speed flash sync and kind of counteract the sun really easily by that really fast shutter speed. So that's great.
Now, I know that the flash that's built in here isn't all that powerful, but I will say that I really do appreciate that this camera has a built-in flash. Even though it's obviously not particularly powerful, it actually clears the lens pretty nicely and is an entirely usable flash. One of my favorite things about the Highline is that this is basically a brand new park. I mean, the railroad's been here for a long time, but the actual park itself has just been redone. So like Central Park, Prospect Park, those parks have been here for such a long time. This park feels brand new with beautiful lighting, beautiful plants, and it's really a very cool place. The other great thing about the Highline is that, I mean, it's obviously super popular. There's people all over the place. And it's kind of like a shortcut through the city. And you can go from 34th Street all the way down to 14th Street without actually walking on any city streets. So when you combine this sort of like new park plus the up above the street, it's really a great place to be. And it's actually, there's sort of like a voyeur aspect to it with all the buildings that are being built right up against the Highline, and you can look right into people's apartments. So, you know, it's, even though this is a sort of a tourist destination and it's not necessarily a secret, you know, in New York, this is really an excellent place. And I'm kind of proud of New York that they put the money and put this aside and turn this into a park as opposed to tearing it down and just turning it into more condos, which frankly most people wanted to do.
So I guess the real question, Jay, is with all we've said about the camera tonight, what do you think your final verdict on the X100T is?
Well, I mean, I love it. I really do. I love the way it looks, and I love the pictures that it takes particularly. I think we talked about an intangible magic when it takes the pictures. And I know that kind of sounds like BS, but I think the combination of the sensor, which is really an excellent sensor, especially for an APS-C size sensor, with the choices that the camera makes and your aperture priority, it makes excellent choices as far as shutter speed and ISO. And again, I think it sounds kind of cheesy, but the film simulations that this camera has inside actually look really nice.
Yeah, they do, and you talked about that intangible quality, and I think that's an interesting concept. I had heard lots of Fuji photographers talking about the concept of this intangible Fuji magic, and going into it, I wanted to think,
You want to be like, that's kind of...
yeah, it sounds kind of like a BS thing, and I wanted to think, well, that intangible quality is probably that you feel kind of cool holding this camera, as opposed to, is it really taking any better of an image? And I feel like I kind of was a convert in the end. Not that it's a magical camera that does so much better than any other camera, but I really did have lots of keepers when I went out shooting with this camera, and I kind of felt that intangible quality.
If it's going to be your only camera and you're going to do more than street photography, if you want to do anything with, say, portraits.
Yeah, I mean, if you're doing sports where you need to get really close into the action from the stands, this isn't going to be the camera you pick.
It's not designed for that.
Of course.
But, you know, I think that for what it does really well, and it's really a joy to use.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I found the camera was a joy to use. I really enjoyed shooting with it. I had a few negatives. One of them was that I felt that the burst speed suffered a little when you were shooting in RAW. For instance, when I tried to shoot a burst in RAW mode, I was only able to get about 7 or 8 frames before the buffer filled up.
Right.
And that wasn't so great. I mean...
And you said the processor you felt was a little bit slow as well.
Yeah, the processor was a bit slow, and that's related, I guess, that when you go after shooting, say, a burst, or even a couple RAWs in a row, when you hit play, there's sort of this little spinning wheel that comes up, and I felt it was a little bit too long. I know that's a little bit of a nitpick, so that's not a deal breaker for me.
What do you think, Josh? Would you buy this camera?
Well, that's a tough call for me, and I think a lot of that comes down to the price of the camera itself. The camera retails at $12.99. Of course, I've seen it as low as $10.99 or even $9.99 on crazy sales, but retail price of $12.99. If you think about other Fuji cameras even, if you take the X-T10, which was just announced, and that's kind of the baby brother of the X-T1. It's probably a little bit smaller than this, but the big difference is its interchangeable lens. So if you want to go with the super minimalist, only one lens sort of thing, you can actually do that.
Sure.
You can take one lens out, say the 27mm pancake lens, which is pretty similar in size, pretty similar in focal length. It's a little bit slower than this lens at a 2.8 instead of an f2. But you can get a very similar shooting experience. It probably won't be as silent because it doesn't have a leaf shutter.
Yeah.
But for the most part, you're getting a very similar shooting experience. That camera is $7.99. If you take that 27mm lens, you could get that for $349. That puts you at $1149. So it's cheaper than the retail of this. And I guess that's where my problem lies, in that this camera's a splurge, and for most people, it's probably not going to be your only camera, so...
I kind of disagree a little bit, only in the sense that I think that this could actually be your only camera. If you are somebody who is interested in taking a camera with you when you go on a trip, and or want something a little bit better than a standard point and shoot, and are willing to spend a little bit of money to get something that's really an excellent camera. I think that if you are looking for a camera system, where you're looking for an all-in-one system, then obviously this isn't going to be the camera for you, because you can't switch out the lenses.
You can actually, there's one little thing you could do, and there's 2 sort of adapters that you could put on this lens.
Which kind of bring it out.
It makes it bigger, and it would turn it into one. The telephoto one will bring it out to a 50mm, and the wide angle I think is a 21 or a 28. I
kind of ruins the point, I think, though, in a way.
That's true.
So if you're going to do that, then get the X-T10. So I think the overall takeaway is it's a really enjoyable camera that takes really great pictures. And if you have the money for it, I highly recommend it.
Yeah, I highly recommend it too. And I went into it not wanting to love it because of all the things I said, of feeling like maybe they put form over function.
Curmudgeon.
I am a little bit of a grump, but no, I guess I really wound up loving the images I got out of that camera and the shooting experience of it. So I recommend it as well. It's just a matter of whether or not that money is something that you can put into a fixed lens camera. Let us know what you think, and please subscribe to the channel. We really appreciate it.
Leave us some comments, and thanks for watching.